Welcome to the debate. It is Thursday, February 12th, 2026. Today, we are standing inside the home, but, let's be clear, this is not the home we knew even 5 years ago. We are looking at a structural transition from the smart home, which, let's be honest, was often just a collection of fragmented, frustrated gadgets, to what we're now calling the cognitive home. We're talking about living spaces powered by generative AI and, crucially, unified by the Matter protocol.
And that framing brings us right to the central question, doesn't it? The question we really need to wrestle with today. We've moved from these so-called connected homes, where we basically used our phones as glorified remote controls, to homes that actively think, that listen, and predict our behavior. So does this shift represent the ultimate liberation? Say in energy efficiency and care for our aging population? Or, and this is my concern, have we voluntarily entered a glass house of surveillance that slowly, maybe imperceptibly, erodes our autonomy?
Well, I'm taking the position that after years of broken promises and what I call gadget fatigue, the integration of generative AI and these interoperability standards like Matter has finally created a home that works for us. It's no longer a toy, it's become a necessary engine for sustainability and health.
And I'm going to argue that despite the seductive convenience, and I'll admit it is seductive, we are facing what researchers call an autonomy paradox. I believe that this intimate surveillance and a kind of technological paternalism are stripping users of control and privacy in their most personal spaces. We are, in effect, trading agency for an algorithm, and I'm just not sure we've read the terms of service on that deal.
Okay, let's start with the context, because 2026 feels very, very different from 2021. For a long time, the smart home was, well, it was basically a joke. We saw reports like those from the Tech Seeking Human channel detailing just how dumb automation really was. You remember this, right? You had sprinkler systems watering gardens during massive rainstorms because they were just following a rigid timer, completely unaware of the actual weather.
Oh, absolutely. Or, heating systems blasting empty houses because the geofencing feature on a phone failed to register that you'd left for work. It was a rocky start. The promise was the Jetsons, but the reality was you debugging error logs on a Sunday afternoon. You spent more time managing the house than actually living in it.
Exactly. But 2026 marks the turning point because two massive shifts have finally collided. First, we have Matter. For the listeners who might just know the name but not the mechanics, Matter is the industry unifying standard that finally broke down those walls between Apple, Google, and Amazon. It's a common language that lets devices talk to each other locally.
And that local part is crucial, which I'm sure we'll get to.
Right. And the second shift is the integration of generative AI, specifically systems like Amazon's Alexa Plus. So we've shifted from that rigid binary logic of if this, then that, to reactive, adaptive living. And the economics finally back this up. Recent research shows that smart home investments are now economically viable, with average monthly energy savings hitting around $120. I mean, that is real money for families. And the user satisfaction rate is sitting at 85%. The cognitive home isn't a novelty anymore, it's a tool.
I see why you think that. And look, I won't deny the allure of saving $120 a month. That's tangible. But let me give you a different perspective. You call it a cognitive home, but I look at the literature, specifically a review from the International Journal of Advanced Research in Science, Communication, and Technology. And what I see is the autonomy paradox.
Break that down. What does that actually mean for someone at home?
So the autonomy paradox suggests that as the efficiency goes up, that 30% energy reduction you mentioned, the user's sense of control actually goes down. We are outsourcing decision-making. So when the house decides when to run the dishwasher or how bright the light should be, you stop being the captain of the ship and you start being, well, just a passenger.
But isn't control often just a burden in disguise? I mean, do you really want to control every light switch and thermostat adjustment manually? That's not agency, that's a chore. If I can outsource the micromanagement of my kilowatt hours to an AI that does it better than I can, that feels like liberation to me, not a loss of control.
It's not about flipping switches. It's about the mechanism of control. To function, these cognitive homes require what's called continuous behavioral profiling. For the house to know you want the lights dim and the music soft because you've had a bad day, it has to know your mood, your schedule, who is in the room with you. Always listening means always potentially recording. We're creating a paradox of trust where the home serves corporate interests, data monetization, over human flourishing. We are inviting a level of surveillance that makes us vulnerable to, well, both corporate overreach and criminal exploitation.
I think that's a philosophical concern that misses the practical leap in utility we are seeing right now. You're worried about the implication, but let's look at the application. Let's look at the shift from dumb automation to this cognitive AI. Look at what Samsung is doing with their bespoke AI line this year. It is no longer just about turning on an air conditioner. We're talking about SmartThings home care proactively detecting low refrigerant or clogged filters.
But is that truly cognitive, or is it just better diagnostics? I mean, cars have had check engine lights for decades.
It is cognitive because of the loop it creates. It enables a first-time fix. The system interprets the data, identifies the specific part needed, and sends that diagnostic data to technicians before they even arrive. Think about the old days of the Beehive app where you had to decipher these cryptic error codes like a puzzle. Error 404 on valve B. What does that even mean? Do I need a plumber or an electrician? This removes that entirely. It moves the home from being a passive shell to a proactive partner in its own maintenance. It saves time, it saves hassle, and it prevents the machine from breaking down in the middle of a heat wave.
I appreciate the utility of a washing machine that calls its own mechanic. I really do. However, this reliance on connectivity creates a massive risk of what I'd call cloud dependency. If the internet cuts out, which, it does, the smart home becomes a dumb home instantly. But more importantly, there's the black box issue.
The black box?
Yes. When these AI systems make decisions, locking a door, changing a setting, ordering a part, based on these incredibly complex algorithms, the user often feels powerless because they can't see why the decision was made. You mentioned the Beehive app puzzle. Well, now the puzzle is just hidden inside a black box. This leads to what's called automation anxiety.
Anxiety seems like a strong word for a thermostat adjusting itself.
It's not just a thermostat, though. What if the AI hallucinates a threat? In AI terms, a hallucination is when the model perceives a pattern that isn't really there. If it misinterprets a chaotic dinner party as some kind of security anomaly and locks down the house or triggers a silent alarm, you are left fighting your own home. Predicting user needs is built on this ethically troubling foundation of constant monitoring. When the prediction fails, the user is the one who suffers. You're suddenly an intruder in your own castle.
I think fighting your own house is a bit of a dramatic exaggeration, though I grant you it's a terrifying image. But the industry has recognized these friction points, which brings me back to the infrastructure that solves it: Matter. You really cannot discuss the 2026 smart home without acknowledging that Matter is the hero of this story. For years, we dealt with what I call the private Soho House exclusivity. If you were on Apple HomeKit, you couldn't use Google Nest devices effectively. It was just a mess.
It was fragmented, I agree. You had to pick a team and then just hope your devices stayed supported.
Exactly. Matter broke that exclusivity. It allows devices to work natively together using Thread and Wi-Fi. Now, Thread is important here. It's a low-power mesh networking protocol. It means your smart bulb talks to your smart switch directly, rather than both having to talk to a router. This improves reliability and speed because it doesn't always have to round trip to the cloud. When big tech, Amazon, Apple, Google, Samsung, finally decided to play nice, it benefited the consumer by preventing that vendor lock-in. It created a unified ecosystem where the best device wins, not the device that just happens to be compatible with your phone.
That's a valid point on usability, and Thread is certainly an improvement over crowding the Wi-Fi bandwidth. However, I would frame it differently. You see a unified ecosystem, I see a unified attack surface.
How so?
Well, Matter makes it easier to connect devices, which means we are connecting more devices. We're flooding our homes with endpoints. Research from Saarland University has shown that home automation systems allow criminals to gain insight into behavioral patterns. By analyzing ventilation and heating usage data, metadata that often isn't encrypted as heavily as, say, video, they can determine exactly when homeowners are absent.
But security protocols are improving alongside the connectivity. Matter has security baked in at the architectural level. It uses a blockchain-style ledger verification for devices.
In theory, yes. But in practice,
We are still dealing with the threat of IoT botnets fueled by cheap devices with weak firmware. An IoT botnet is when hackers take over thousands of insecure devices like smart toasters or cameras and use them to launch cyber attacks. The more connected we are, the more doors we open. And I have to ask you this, who do you actually want listening to you 24/7? When you unify the protocol, you are streamlining the data flow, yes, but you are also creating a single point of failure for privacy. If a hacker cracks the Matter credential, they don't just have your thermostat, they have the whole house.
I see the security concern, and it is valid. Security is always a race between the shield and the sword. But we have to weigh that risk against the profound humanitarian benefits, particularly for the vulnerable. This is where the cognitive home becomes not just a luxury but a necessity. We're talking about ambient assisted living.
Go on, this is usually the strongest argument for automation, and I do want to hear your case.
Because it's the most human one. The evidence is clear. Smart homes allow the elderly to age in place rather than moving to facilities, which is a massive quality of life difference. We are just talking about voice-activated lights, which are helpful for someone with arthritis. We are talking about fall prediction via gait analysis.
Explain how that works, practically.
It's fascinating, really. Sensors in the home, often Wi-Fi sensing or radar, not cameras, can detect minute changes in walking speed and stride length. The AI analyzes this pattern and can predict a high risk of falling before it happens, alerting a caregiver or a family member. We are talking about automated medication dispensing, specifically locked dispensers for Alzheimer's patients that open only at the right time to ensure safety. Telehealth integration allows for vital sign telemonitoring right from the living room. For the disabled population, voice control isn't a novelty. It is an absolute necessity for independence. It restores dignity.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that it's a pure win for dignity. I acknowledge the utility, absolutely. If it keeps someone safe, that's good. But this introduces what I call technological paternalism.
Paternalism?
Yes, we are replacing human care with algorithmic monitoring. There is a genuine fear of the lack of human responders. Automation should augment human care, not replace it. But when you automate the check-ins, the human visits, they can stop. Grandma gets a robot voice asking how she feels instead of a person holding her hand.
But in a world with a massive shortage of professional caregivers, isn't augmentation better than neglect? If the choices are robot checking in or no one checking in, the answer seems obvious to me.
Perhaps, but the quality of that care is debatable. Studies on telehealth efficacy are mixed. Some show reduced symptoms, sure, but others show higher mortality or just inconclusive results compared to traditional care. And we absolutely cannot ignore the digital divide.
The cost issue.
It's a massive barrier. The average initial investment found in recent studies is $3,750, with a high standard deviation. That makes this so-called independence a luxury product. We are telling the wealthy they can age in place with dignity, using gait analysis and smart dispensers, while everyone else is left behind. This isn't a universal right, it's a premium subscription.
The cost is a factor, undoubtedly. But like all technology, flat-screen TVs, smartphones, it scales down over time. The $3,750 today is $1,500 tomorrow. And we have to look at the psychological benefits that are already here. Let's talk about the social device. These cognitive homes are becoming hubs for connection. They democratize communication. Being able to make hands-free video calls, sharing family experiences on a screen in the kitchen, it bridges the gap for isolated individuals. The economic studies showing an 85% satisfaction rate aren't just about saving money on electricity. They are proof that people feel their quality of life is improving.
Or they feel the dopamine hit of a new gadget. I look at the concept of the algorithmic mediator.
That sounds ominous.
It is, if you value organic connection. These devices shape our relationships. When you ask your home to call someone or play music, it prioritizes partnered services or specific contacts based on its own engagement metrics. They are the unseen architects of our social lives.
But isn't that just helpful curation? I mean, if I call my mom every Sunday, the AI knows to prioritize her. That's just smart UI.
It's homogenization. It's creating a paradox of trust. We invite these things in for connection, but they homogenize our social experiences based on corporate goals, not on human curiosity. And the psychological toll is real. The feeling of being watched changes behavior, even in one's own living room. It's the panopticon effect. You perform for the algorithm, even subconsciously. You speak clearer, you act better, because you know the device is listening. That is a heavy, heavy price to pay for hands-free calling.
I think you are underestimating the user's ability to adapt and to set boundaries. People know the difference between a speaker and a spy. But let's look at the hard numbers again as we wrap up. You talk about the cost of privacy, but the financial and ecological reality is undeniable. A 30% reduction in energy consumption is massive for the climate. Annual savings of over $3,000 when you factor in proactive maintenance, preventing costly repairs, plus the energy savings. In a world facing climate crisis and economic pressure, the cognitive home is an economic and ecological necessity. The growing pains of security are real, I grant you, but they are being addressed by standards like Matter. We can't turn back the clock.
We can't turn back the clock, you're right. The genie is out of the bottle. But we must not accept a set-it-and-forget-it model. While the Jetsons' future is here, the risks of intimate surveillance and security breaches through behavioral profiling are just too high to ignore. True smart living requires what researchers call human-in-the-loop governance.
Meaning what exactly?
Meaning we need a shift toward edge AI. This is the key takeaway for anyone listening who is worried about privacy. Edge AI means the processing happens locally, on the chip inside the device, not in the cloud. Your voice recording, your gait analysis, it stays in your house. It never has to leave your four walls. If we don't demand that architecture, we lose the house to the machine.
And I think that is where we find our common ground. The technology is no longer a futuristic concept. It is a current reality, but it demands active, not passive, engagement from users. We need to embrace the efficiency, but demand the local processing.
Absolutely. We have to ask ourselves the final question. Does the technology own the house, or do you?
Thank you for joining the debate.